Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Eating at a Meeting. I am your host, Tracy Stuckrath, and today we are here to talk about ensuring everyone can attend, the key to inclusive event planning. And I am excited to introduce you to my new friend. I do this wrong all the time. Jami Paronto. I say that right?
You did.
Okay, good. She is the Senior Global Account Director at HPN Global. And I literally met her last week. And I met her, and just so you know you can go into what HPN is, but she's been in sales and operations in the meetings industry for more than 20 years. And she's based out of Grand Junction, Colorado. But we were at an event last week. It was North Star Meetings Group's Destination Southwest in Houston. And I noticed when I came into this meeting space, it was for the reception, and it was 2 flights of stairs. Is that right? Yeah. Basically, I think it was 2 flights of stairs to come down.
Yes.
And to get into the space. That's how I got in. And then I noticed her from across the room, and I was always leaving the room. I just stopped and was like, "Can I ask you a question?" I'm like, "How did you get in this room?" Right? Because Jami utilizes a wheelchair. And the only entrance that I could see was the stairs. And I literally looked around. And so that's how we met. I don't even think I told you my name first. So hi, Jami, I'm Tracy.
Yeah, we met. So it's perfect. Good stuff.
Okay. Yes, exactly. So, and then I asked if I could take photos of you trying to access the buffet. And because it was a higher buffet than typical, in my opinion. But then we spent the next 2.5 days together. So welcome to the show. And thank you for agreeing to be on my show 5 days after you met me. So,
well, thank you for inviting me. And yes, it was I think we have a great little friendship right now. So
yes.
Thank you for inviting me. I look forward to discussion and listening to other podcasts you have. The information you provided in our education lessons and really having a talk session was wonderful. And it was really relatable, and to everyone in the room. We were all chatting about that right afterwards and in the afternoon as well. So how relevant it was to us, to all of us, bringing up subjects we think about, but not focus on completely. So
right.
It was great.
Exactly.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. I appreciate that. And I jumped on the opportunity to invite you for the fact that we were personally engaged in that experience together. And we're not here to disparage the hotel for the stairways and whatever, but because they did actually recover and do a lot of really good things for you while you're there. But I also want to bring up the fact that you're a relatively new wheelchair user. So you're bringing, with more than 20 years of experience in the meetings industry, you have a different perspective of meetings. So can you talk about, I guess, first, how did you get into that meeting space? And then 2, how has your perspective changed?
Well, I am a relatively new user, going on about 2.5 years of being in a wheelchair. At that particular space, I actually will always find someone. I typically also, before I attend any event or even am looking at something for one of my clients, I go ahead and do a deep dive into what facilities are available at the property. I look through everything on a little different eye, but I always look for someone and just ask an employee that's there at the venue, whether that be a hotel, meeting space, event space, a restaurant, and just ask if I see we're down here. Sometimes someone will mention it at first, but I typically will ask, okay, how do I get down there? Is there an elevator? I ask those accessibility questions. And typically they'll say, oh, yes, there is. Or there is something outside. And that's where we were thinking of that. But also the great thing is with North Star and Samantha Hammer, because I've attended many before, she will ask me, do you feel comfortable going outside to get there? Because the accessible entrance is outside. And even before we knew it was raining, would you like to miss the event? Or of course we say no, but you know that there is always that option because do you feel comfortable? And that's just a great question to ask is how do you feel? Do you feel comfortable joining, or we can make other arrangements? So if you physically don't feel like you can join us, and you would just either, whether that be embarrassment or whatever the feeling is, the program manager typically just asks that question. It's better to ask than to allow someone to feel just not taken care of or not looked after.
And also just don't do for them. Like, just don't start pushing your wheelchair. You need to ask, because that's like touching your body. Yeah,
exactly. It is an extension of your body. So it is your personal space. So as long as, and people are, well, I don't know whether I should ask or not. And it's always just good practice, just like you would with anybody that you were with, you would ask another human being, what can I help you with? Or here, let me grab that glass for you. You would do that with someone's hands are full, whether they are able-bodied or in a chair or with a walker or something. You would just ask a human being, just be a kind human being, and always put yourself in someone else's shoes.
Literally, yeah. And and I've talked about it, and I don't know if I said it in that education session too, is like, but have you come on that site visit with me, right? To get somebody from your team or one of your attendees, whether it's somebody that utilizes a wheelchair or it's got food allergies, have them review the menus or go on the site visit with you to see how it actually, they would get to that space.
Absolutely. That's something. So at that property, and they were all staff and all departments. They didn't have I'm sure they have talked about it, but I think just the kindness and courtesy of the staff that they have there at the Woodlands Resort, just they're kind people. They were kind people. You can tell, being around the industry for so long, who belongs to working in this, who has it in their heart, I guess, to be in hospitality. That's why I have stayed so long, because I like to take care of people. But they stepped in, and it was great for them to take me outside they were very apologetic. I'm sorry that it's raining. It's like, well, that's an act of God. We can't change that. Right. So I'm not going to melt, but let me go grab an umbrella. It's like, no, we're just going down a couple flights of stairs, but it was outside. But part of that was they couldn't do anything about it because of the age of the property. Beautiful property, beautiful room. But again, we deal with architecture and other things that we didn't think of in the 60s and 70s and 80s, before ADA and everything. So they've done what they could, but their team got us where we needed to go.
Right. I think you and I were going from the meeting space back to our rooms into the lobby. And you mentioned the carpeting as well. Some of the carpeting is, in some hotels, is super thick, where some of it, so but you said your room was pretty close to the entryway to the building, and that property it's the Woodlands, the Hilton Woodlands, and it had multiple buildings, lower buildings that everybody stayed in. Right.
Correct. And the only thing that I did mention to the property was that in an accessible room, it had carpet, because again, when they do those keys, everybody is the same, other than a few accessibility or a lot of improvements are made based on height of the coffee maker, height of the hang bars in the closet, things like that. But it would be really nice if they could put a wood floor or tile, vinyl planking even would work, because it does make it a little bit easier. I am in a manual wheelchair, so I have a little bit more, but I guess I'm a little lower to the ground and I can push myself, but it's hard to even just take my luggage with me on carpet. So I typically will have a bellman or guest services person help me, even with the small bag, take it, because it's hard to roll myself and to roll the luggage anywhere across the room or anywhere across the property, depending on whether that's one building or 6 buildings or 8.
Right. So. Yeah. Well, and even if you've got a manual wheelchair and somebody else has got an electric or whatever, but it's understanding, just picking up the phone and having that conversation with you.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
And
makes with any difference. Electric wheelchair is still going to have those problems. on carpet. And especially when the carpet's thicker, that's great because it's newer. It has wonderful padding. It's much higher quality. So that is a good thing. It feels great to walk on if you're right. But that is something to take into account. Luckily, I was in a typical guest room, not a humongous suite. Darn it.
Right.
But it still was very easy to get around in my room, and things were placed exactly where they needed to be. For my reach, sitting in a chair. Some people sit up a little bit higher, but I think for me personally, my accessible room, and I always call ahead and ask for it and ask it to be a little bit closer to the elevators. I still kind of have to temper that with, I don't want to be too close to the elevators to hear that going up and down all night. That's just something that I am sensitive to. But I do want to be a little bit closer so I'm not making a complete trek every time I just leave the elevator to get to my guest room, which in some high-rise hotels, I have to be closer to, they'll put someone in closer to just an stairwell.
Yeah.
This is for emergencies. I was in another hotel in Houston in September. Crazy that I've been there twice in 2 months. Two unrelated things, but what a great city. But yes, my guest room was right next to the stairwell on 23, 21. I can't remember which floor I was on at this particular property, in a convention hotel with 1,500 rooms. And I definitely had a long trek to the end of the hallway. And the great thing was at that property, though, every now and then, depending on the time I was going to an event or something, a housekeeper would say, "May I help you?" And look at me questioningly, even if we couldn't speak, and be like, "Oh, no, I've got it." But they would just jump in, "No," and they would help. So it's just being cognizant of, again, being kind and seeing if someone needs.
Well, and it reminds me of a gentleman who, when I spoke at the North Star Independent Planners event conference a couple of years ago, Jack Molisani, in the middle of my session, literally jumped up out of his chair. He's like, "Oh my gosh, I never thought about that with my attendees. And what's the emergency plan to get them if they're on the 23rd floor, if they're a wheelchair user, right? How do I make sure that they get out of the hotel?" So that was like 4 or 5 years ago, but I can still remember it. He literally jumped out of his chair saying, "I've got to think about that." And it really does make a difference.
It does make a difference. That's by having a wonderful front desk staff that whether they know, they mentioned that to me when I checked in at the front desk at this particular hotel that I was at and said, "I don't have you close to the elevator, but I need to put you in this accessible room and I don't have another. This is where it's best." And working in operations and starting at the front desk, I understood why. But again, it's just that kindness and explaining, because other people might not know. Just because I'm in the industry and I worked at the front desk and I know how operations works, where I have to be placed, it just needs to be explained. This is why I can't put you here. I need to put you here just in case there is an emergency. Same reason why we always learn about how to put on our masks on the airplane. Heaven forbid that something happens to us, but they still tell us every single time we fly how to do that. And we have to be prepared. And so people just thinking, and that's changed my perspective a little bit, because yes, physically, I even see it, but figuratively and literally, I do see things from a different perspective, which is great, because when I'm traveling with some of my colleagues from HPN, they're like, "Oh, I just started taking care of my mom and dad now." And when they're in their 80s, late 70s, 80s. And now I know what I need to ask, like you do. One of my very good friends, she says, "I travel with my parents a lot. They come with my husband and I. And now I ask, they gave us an accessible room, but it had a bathtub. Well, she can't lift her leg over. I don't have legs, so I have to have a roll-in shower." But she said, "I call and ask." I said, and that's the thing, is a bathtub not everybody can get into. Someone with one leg, like myself, I cannot get into the bathtub. And an older person can't. Yes, accessible, and it has the grab bars, but my goodness, how does she lift her leg to even get into the tub? And that's something that people don't always, and that goes again to with eating, eating at a buffet, everything, even getting coffee.
Right. Exactly. Well, and I think it showed some pictures of buffet heights and like
Right.
and where we were. I mean, but even the breakfast ones were pretty high. They're just their tables. And I know I'm sitting at a 72-inch round. I'm at the Brawley Convention Center. There's a convention going on behind me or downstairs. But, thinking about the table heights of everything that you do, because we're also then raising the chafing dishes, right? They want to make physical differentiations to make the table look prettier, right? Versus putting those, here's 12 ugly chafing dishes, right?
Right.
But it makes it hard.
It does. It does. Yeah. The nice thing being at my level, I can always, if the print is big enough, I can read this. But if the print's not big enough, that also gives me a disadvantage. But as we think about how the varying heights on how tables are set, buffet tables, or even tables that we sit at and meet at or eat at, or just dining at, we don't think about the presentation is such a big part of what the culinary team does. They think about it, it's art. And they think about that. And when the buffet tables are a little bit high, and I think when we're eating, and food is such a big part of having a communal meal, brings people together, like you talked about. But if you can't see what you're eating, or all you see is that silver chafing dish, someone can explain it to you, but you don't know what it looks like. And we do still eat with our eyes a little bit as we're loading our plates up or deciding what we want to eat if it's not a plated meal. We definitely do that. And we're not able to see anything at all. Right. Even with the description, someone will typically walk with me. I always have, in our industry, it's great because we take care of people, all of us. And so someone will always ask, well, let me hold that for you, or let me get that and I'll come back and get mine. But the great thing is, especially at the hotel that we were just at, everybody, whether they noticed a need or not, stood ready and willing next to me. Let me do that. Let me help you. And just teaching your staff to just be recognized. Anything that has maybe a little bit of difficulty, even handling a glass and a plate. Even when I wasn't in a chair, receptions are hard. I can't hold on to my plate and hold on to my drink, and my cocktail is a little bit more important than my food is. So how do I?
And then use a fork. Yeah. Otherwise, you're like licking the plate.
And I'm talking and all of that. It's hard enough to do that rather than having another limitation. Or I guess it's just the way things are. So you kind of adapt. But it's already hard enough as it is trying to mingle at a networking reception with food and drink in your hands.
Right. Exactly. All right. So Felix just popped in here on LinkedIn and said, it's a good thing to hear people reactively say, quote, I've got to think about that. What is better, I feel, is to equip people to think proactively, holistically, system-wide. Love that, Felix. Yes.
Yes.
Definitely.
Thank you, Felix.
We have to think about it for the whole, holistically, thinking about how do we create that inclusive experience across the board. And that's where it's like having someone who utilizes a wheelchair attend the site visit, or somebody with food allergies ask questions about the menu before you post them. Or how, actually one year, this was, and I know I've told this story before, but this was back in 2004, 2005. I was at Disney and we did a scavenger hunt across Epcot. And at the end of the event, one of the attendees was like, I really wish we were told that we were going to be walking 5 miles today because I would have adjusted my pain medicine on my side. And he's a former NFL football player. So he has that he can adjust it on his thing. But this is before, and I'm going to say, I didn't think about that. Right? Like, hey, we need to tell people, hey, this activity is going to be doing this. Are you comfortable with this? It's, as Felix said, be proactive about it. And you don't want to give away secret if you want that, but you have to let them know the physicality needs of that activity.
Correct. Some people might not want to share any of that information, but we are being proactive and asking that question and thinking of it in all aspects. Kind of just a quick thing when I am sourcing for clients with meeting component, I think about yourself, even if you're not in a wheelchair or have any needs, put yourself as an attendee just a quick think as you're starting to plan, how am I going to get them? And is 10 minutes enough, or do we really need 20 minutes to get people back and forth? Because there might be people with challenges getting back and forth between events or to another area. Is there transportation? Luckily, a lot of times when we're on larger resort properties or they'll have a golf cart or a car that is there for people who I was at another meeting on Lake Tahoe, and the golf cart was there to help people that one just had a surgery a couple of weeks ago, and she was raring and ready to go. But by the third day, because she had walked so much and she had been convalescing basically, she needed that extra help. And she says, is it okay if I just stick with you because you need those things too? And is it absolutely? And I think it's just, again, to reaching out and seeing and noticing someone, again, kindness, just reaching out and being a human being and looking at everybody. We're all the same. And how would we want to be treated? And that really is just of everything.
It really is. And we were talking about before the show came on, our one friend at the conference as well, who gets vertigo going up the stairs, right? And she stood there for a few minutes at the bottom of the stairs until somebody else was leaving to see if they could help her up the stairs because she didn't want to go find someone and ask. So we need to make sure that, and not that she's going to necessarily disclose that on an event registration form, but as event organizers, we need to have that buddy system of sorts, or that I like to call myself a culinary concierge. So can you have that accessibility concierge to that people can reach out to? Because even so, there should be a number, there should be a person that you can call no matter what, if you need help.
Right. That is right. There are certain brands within our industry that do that have meeting concierge, but they're there to do kind of red coat service. So they're there for everything that the banquet staff or the sales staff is not prepared to do, but they're there to help in that case. And they're just someone who observes and watches and sees what things can be done. Again, too, after the pandemic and how cognizant everybody is on salaries and budgets and things like that, they're not always able to staff that extra person, but maybe putting someone on your team with who you have is allotted to the function, just making someone kind of a captain to be, this is your job tonight too, is in addition, is to just kind of be on the lookout. Remind everybody before shift, and we have our little shift meetings before an event starts, to just say, reminder, there might be some people with needs, whether that be a visual need as well. They could have blindness and need things explained to them, and also help. Anything, just to have a champion that can help your team, whoever is there. That's that champion's job, is to put that extra little personal touch. And but always just to ask, may I help you? What can I do? May I help you? And if someone says, no, I've got it, don't take that as an affront. Just say, okay, thank you, but please let me know if you need anything in the future. I'll be happy to help. And some people get offended if you say no, and it's not a bad thing, but it's just polite to go ahead and ask if someone needs help.
Well, and I think I love the idea of giving that role to everybody, a different person at every event, right? Because it gives them a different perspective. But I also think, and because we were chatting with some of the servers that were there, they've been there. One guy who was setting up a table for me and Samantha has worked at that property for 40 years.
Right.
So they are proud of their job. And I met a server at a Hilton Hotel in Orlando, just happened to be a Hilton as well. And he came to the United States not speaking English at all, put his kids through college, 20, 30 years at that one property, right? And they love their job and they love to be helpful. They want to be, and I think sometimes we discount that servers are servers. Servers are people, and servers are there. They love to support us, and we can't do our jobs without them.
Exactly. Well, and I'm thinking of on our way back from an event, we had our driver because he had driven me around different places because we were not just at the resort we were at. We became friends. He showed us that video of his daughter's wedding in Dubai. And it was a family wedding video that he was so proud to share with us because we had become friends, because that was the type of service and human being that it was, that he really wanted to share that with us because he was with us all day in different spots for 15 minutes here, for 5 minutes here. But he felt comfortable showing us and wanted to show how wonderful. And it was probably the best wedding video. It's one of the best presentation videos ever that I've ever seen. But that's what his feeling of warmth was. And that is, again, too, just humans interacting with humans. And that was probably one of the best parts of this whole trip. And it was with our driver of a car that North Star had got for me because of the accessibility to get into the car, and it was lower to the ground. So it made it a little bit easier. So made it a little bit easier for me to transfer to, which I don't normally have a problem, but it was that kindness of thinking, oh, I need to get a lower level vehicle, not necessarily a car, but an SUV that has a little lower bottom because it'll make it easier and that was just the meeting planner thinking outside the box, telling the destination. It's that communication, telling the sponsors of the event, the Woodlands, visit the Woodlands, and then them communicating that with the transportation team and Access, who was handling drivers, our motor coaches, all the things that we traveled on for what we were doing there. So it's just, again, that full communication that everybody just needs to be aware. And I think it's better to make sure that through the entire process, same as people with food allergies or other type of intolerances, that we communicate until it's better to give extra information. And then if you need it, you have it, rather than forgetting things, I guess, is what I want to say, is just give them information and they will utilize and make sure that they are looking at every single thing that we have, that the meeting planner or the convention services manager has passed along. And don't feel anything is too small. Always just mention it. This person is highly sensitive to really fragrant flowers. So, of course, which we shouldn't be putting on tables anyway, but, sometimes it happens because they're beautiful. We have to think about those things because that affects someone that might have an anaphylactic episode because of a smell, or it brings back a memory that triggers something else. So we have to be kind of cognizant, but make sure that if you know of something with an attendee, or I knew another attendee because we were in Seattle together at a totally different company meeting, and he remembered and he saw me and he's like, Jamie, here, let me help you. And it was like, Alex, this is wonderful. Thank you. So good to see you. Were we in No, we were in Seattle together 3 weeks ago, kind of thing. But it's just, again, here, I know you need help over this. Let me just stop it, kind of thing.
Well, Felix piped in 2 more times here. He said, how can we ever hope to be successful in whatever we are doing without considering and involving the direct beneficiaries? I love that, Felix.
That was a great question.
Yeah. And then he just said he's got to run. Thank you for this chat. So he's actually a new friend on LinkedIn. I've never met him either, but he's from Canada and he does food safety. So,
well, I want to reach out to him. Thank you, Felix.
Yeah. He made some good points he made a comment on the post about the young lady that recently died in LA. Did you see that story? Yeah.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. And actually she passed away the day that I spoke at North Star.
That night. Yeah. That night. Yeah. Oh my goodness. That's crazy.
It's very scary. Okay. So I want to go back. So you've utilized a wheelchair now for 2.5 years. And I know there's people who say I'm in a wheelchair. I'm a wheelchair user. There's a variety of different ways that people say that they use wheelchairs. So 2.5 years, what is the most, since you've started using a wheelchair, what is the most common accessibility challenge that you've faced in attending an event?
I think it's just little things like curb cutouts, handling how to get from point A to point B. Is there 2 steps involved. Do I have to go all the way around? I could go four-wheeling, well, two-wheeling, I guess we could say. I do have extra big, small wheels too, so I guess it is 4, maybe 6. Anyway, I think the biggest challenge is just getting from point A to point B. That is probably the number one thing I think of. And so when I arrive at a spot, whatever it may be, even in my daily life, it's like, how am I going to get here to there with what I need to do? And how am I going to complete the task? And that could be whether putting my brakes on to sit so I'm not moving, so I can lift myself up in stands a little bit, but then I have to have a counter to balance on. So it's really just a little extra thought and not rushing into everything, which makes my life slow down and my stress level go down a little bit because I'm taking time to think about what needs to be done, which even just a few minutes. Okay, let me take a breath. How am I going to do that? And we have to take a deep breath and breathe. And that helps lower everything down. It doesn't give me anxiety trying to figure out how I'm going to get here and here quickly, because I will just take that few extra minutes to make it safe for everybody, not just for myself, but for anybody around me, so I don't cause a distraction or an impediment in how we're traveling or how we're just walking from one end of the room to the other end of the room. I will look at how, and that's just the biggest thing, is how to get from point A to point B.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a really good, because we just think, oh, we're just going to walk there, right? And in my slides, I showed that picture of the beach scene, right? And there's that walkway, and what do you do when you get to that end of the walkway? We as planners in designing this inclusive experience need to think about that. Is there an accessible beach wheelchair, or are you putting those really, I don't know what they're called, but they're the beach mats. They were actually originally designed, I believe, for the Marine Corps to get Humvees on the beach.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's these black mats, and so that they can run out. And can you put that across the beach so everybody can utilize them? But I like the fact that you said, let's just take a step back, to just take a second and say, okay, how am I going to do that? It's even like, how am I going to climb Mount Kilimanjaro? Right.
Right.
Sometimes it is that hard.
It is that hard, but it's that easy too. It's one step at a time, move a little bit. It's even on the trade show floor. Sometimes tables are really close together. Think about either not having tablecloths or using scubas if you have those, because long tablecloths get stuck in wheels. And I look sometimes when I'm trying to navigate a trade show floor, I'm the one that's moving from station to station, and I sometimes have to go up and around, but it really is just, again, taking a few minutes to navigate. But, we have to think about those things. Again, think about how anybody, even someone who is just walking, can trip on those long tablecloths that are supposed to be tucked under the table, but we really can't do that because they have to be long enough to cover, but then they're too long, they drag too much on the floor. So they really are a trip hazard for anybody. But especially for wheelchair users or people using a walker or a cane, because we get caught in all the extra fabric. So that's something that's at least maybe allow a couple extra inches. And so that's something when you're trying to maximize, especially for a trade show, you're trying to maximize the revenue by having people pay for their tables. You have to kind of fit in, do I want people to be safe, or do I want to make extra money by having an extra row? Can you recoup that revenue in a different way? Can I add an extra $25 to everybody's fee maybe? Or if that fiscally makes sense, but you have to think about that as well when you're laying out your design. And think about, is there another sponsorship, or can I have someone sponsor the table linen? And then we can pay for scubas if someone is sponsoring all the linen for the event. That also too gets someone's name out there. It's publicity as well, and marketing. If Linens and Such help do all the table linens, and see, I just want to make sure that, and then in a conference center, an IAP conference center, again, there are no table coverings. But not every, and also too, if you are in a property that, or a venue that is widely used, you like those table covers because, again, too, you're not always having to buy new tables because they have to look wonderful.
Right.
all the
That's
time,
true,
which
yeah.
you're covering. So you have to think about that too. So,
Yeah.
but about the revenue, and
Yeah.
get a sponsor to help you.
Right. Totally. Well, and I'm going to put this up here from Nancy real quick, and then I'm going to come back to say that. This is a little bit long, but without getting too personal, I started looking at accessibility more critically when my dad, who has Parkinson's, was using his walker. Different mobility challenges, but the simple task of opening a restroom door, fortunately, he has some upper body strength, but I'm not sure how successful he's been from a seated position. Really good point. And in my old corporate job, like there was a door with a handle to go into the restroom, and then there's the little hallway, and then there's another door to go, and you have to open both doors. I'm like, why are you not making this just easy to get in and out, right? Why is there not a handicap? Now they're waves, right? The buttons are the waves to let somebody in, right? And do you know if that door is opening inward or outward, right?
Right,
Yeah,
right. And that's something that some properties, I was stuck in a Hyatt hotel, I will call them out, downtown Minneapolis a couple of years ago at Connect, that they had the signs up that it was an accessible bathroom. And so, but the signs were there, the grab bars were there, but the door didn't open out, it opened in. So someone in a wheelchair couldn't, and I actually had to go to the bathroom. So I was trying to wiggle and I got stuck in the stall because the door only opened in. And there was some other meeting planners. We were there for a reception, and it's little things like that you have to think that does the door swing in and out? But an accessible door needs to swing out, not in, for people to use, especially for someone who's in a walker. They have to have that door come out so they can move and position themselves moving with the walker as well, because it's a little bit harder because they have both hands that are typically holding on to move themselves and to steady themselves with both hands being used. They're not able to do that. And if someone is not paying attention, or there's not someone there to help, because again, we all like to be independent as human and using that walker. But that's where, again, too, just kind of think about it for a second, helping your elderly parents, helping a smaller child even, kind of thing that you need to know and think about that. And it goes back to thinking about others and not necessarily just always being the me and thinking about others around you.
Yeah. Well, and I want to go back to the thinking about the room design as well and thinking through how you are going to access that space. But think about when we design our floor plans, right? And you have to get them approved by the fire marshal, and it's 6 feet between the tables. But when you put the chairs there and then you put the people in the chairs, there's not 6 feet between those tables anymore. So if you did not get into that room first, ahead of everyone else, and I know somebody who experienced this, you can't get through the tables. How are you going to get, and especially if it's assigned seating, or even if not, what if you wanted to sit up front and now you can't get to those front tables because everybody's sitting in their chairs and in conversation and not thinking about Jami trying to wheel herself through the room.
But it's also too, I think, because when I sit in a chair, not a wheelchair, but I'm sitting in a chair, I'm one of those people that sits on the front edge of my seat. So I don't pull myself all the way into my chair back. So you have to think about how people just sit down. Like some people sit all the way back to them with their chair back. Some people like to sit on the edge.
I'm doing that right now. Totally. Yeah. And so I think the fire marshals need to rethink too, like, hey, needs to be 6 feet between the chairs, not between the edges of the table.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Because again, back to back and in rounds, when you're trying to maximize, you have to really think, is it really worth putting those 2 extra rounds of 10 in there? I mean, comfort level for people. Also, too, you have to think about when the tables are that tight, banquet servers with their big tray jacks. How are you allowing the servers to be able to do their job efficiently and even acceptably if they can't even move and they have a tray? We can't move. Just trying to
like a 70 pounds.
And they have that big. They have the big tray that they're trying to carry with everybody's food or drinks or anything like that. We don't take that always into effect about how the servers are going to move around and be able to do their jobs to the best of their ability. We're setting them up to fail. we're not allowing them to have the space they need to do their jobs.
Well, and I attended an event in New York City a couple of years ago, and I was flabbergasted by how the servers struggled to get between the tables. And I don't know how that room got approved by the fire marshal at all. And one of my friends used and she uses like the hand poles, right, on her to maneuver, to walk. I don't know what those are called. And so she was struggling to get through this. Thank you. Crutches. That's the right word.
Yeah, they're crutches. Even if you have the ones that are rammed on your arms, someone who has, or someone with spina bifida that's trying to move through cannot utilize and doesn't have space to get to. So we have to sit on the periphery. I usually end up doing that just because it makes it easier and people don't have to move or anything like that. But sometimes that we have to think about, we want to make everybody feel included and inclusive. Mm-hmm. And if people with special needs, no matter what physical needs, have to be kind of on the periphery of everything because it makes it easier, is that really the message we want to send? And does that kind of outweigh for that attendee the actual message of the content? Because they have to sit on the outside. Are they actually absorbing all the content like they should? Because do they feel included? Possibly not. It depends on that individual. I mean, we have to think of those needs as well.
Yeah. Oh, and that just reminded me of another event that I attended, which was an inclusion conference. And there is no way that anyone who utilized a wheelchair or crutches or a scooter could have gotten in that space. And I'm like, how are you being inclusive at your own event when that's called that? Okay, so we need to wrap this up. We could talk, Jami, I am so excited that I met you. Yes, and that I love to talk to strangers and ask them questions. Actually, before we go, 2 final questions for you. Besides the Woodlands Hilton, is there any other property that you've seen that's done a really good job on accessibility and that makes it stand out to you?
Do you know, I'm trying to think. Well, there are so many that do a very good job. And let's talk about Margaritaville, Lake Tahoe. It was an Embassy Suite. It's great, but they had every single thing, even down to my coffee maker and a special little shelf for people in wheelchair users and their accessibility, that the coffee maker wasn't on top of the microwave like it typically is, or on top of a shelf, which I can get up. But if someone is seated, they can't pour the water in the coffee maker to make a cup of coffee. But every single thing in that room was thoughtfully designed to be at the right level. Even to the ironing board, which I do utilize sometimes. Oh, actually, at that hotel, they didn't, because they had the best thing. They had hand steamers in every room instead of irons.
Oh, that's so good. I love that.
That is the best, because anybody can use a steamer. You don't have to have those 2 pieces of equipment. You don't have to find a place to plug it. You just have to find somewhere. You can even do it in the bathroom, hanging it up on the shower rod, but not the
full coring.
Yeah. If you remember that part, the fire part, but no, and having a steamer, and they made sure that every single thing was accessible, that someone thought through that accessibility. So even with someone that was visually impaired or hearing impaired, everything was at the correct level.
That's awesome.
And it just takes a designer or even hotel ops, when they're punching the room, to make that room thought about that. Yes. And I did see another guest room that everything was up just a little bit higher, but they made sure every single touch. And my salesperson at that property came and she said, I just want to see your room just to see how everything is laid out, because that hotel had just been transformed. And I really want to see that. And I said, she goes, oh yeah, everything else is a little bit higher. I said, but not in this room. Everything is great. There's a Hyatt Regency in Baytown, Texas, just outside of Houston. Again, another Houston. Oh my goodness. Houston does a good job. Let's talk about that. But they are a brand new property in Baytown, right there on the shipping lane. But they thoughtfully designed everything. They have smooth floors, every single thing, lighting in between the beds. So if you're in a chair, that lighting is motion activated. So even though they have platform beds, that lighting is unobtrusive. But when anybody gets out of bed, so you don't have the need to fumble around for a nightly, that light comes on when you take a step out of your bed, when you put a foot down on the floor between, I was in a room with two queens, and that light came on. Little things, little touches like that is good for everybody, not just for me.
Oh yeah, totally.
But they are so let's just say Houston did a very good job. And I think, again, too, it's a sense of Texas hospitality.
Yeah.
And we can do that, and people being people. Right. And humans being kind humans.
Exactly. That's awesome. Okay. So my final question that I ask everyone is, what does a safe, sustainable, and inclusive dining experience look like to you?
Well, we need to make sure that if it's sustainable, that, again, too, everything is sourced sustainably, that we are making sure that we don't have any allergens, that anybody with any dietary needs or any religious needs can eat. Because, again, sharing that meal is such a wonderful thing. I think it was in yours, in your presentation, in your education session, when you were talking about having a meal rather than doing a spreadsheet, brings people closer together. So, but to be have sustainability and be safe is really just looking at all the components, making sure that tables but again, too, that you're really looking into and asking those questions about your menu items too. Do these include any shellfish, any dairy, anything like that, made with peanut flour, made with any nut flour? You just have to ask those questions, because it might not say peanut butter on it, but it couldn't. But obviously, it's made with peanut flour that no one would know, because it's just a little bit of those ingredients in there. So. I guess, did I answer the question? Not really.
You did. Yeah. You did. All right. Well, I so appreciate you becoming my new best friend as of last Wednesday or Thursday night. Yep. Everybody, this is Jami, and here is how you can get a hold of her. Paronto. I had to just do a Paronto. There's her LinkedIn profile that you can connect with her on there. And Jami, I really do appreciate you being here. Thank you.
Well, thank you for asking me. This was wonderful. I was a little bit apprehensive when I talked to you about that. I mean, these things. This is what my brothers do. I don't do this. So you did fantastic. It was a pleasure talking to friends. We'll see. That's why, because you're just talking friends. This is great.
Exactly. Yeah, I appreciate that. And all right, everybody, because it's the end of the year, I've created a new survey about the show. So I want to get your input on the show. So if you don't mind taking that survey, I'd appreciate it. eatingatameeting.com/survey. It's pretty easy. So let me know what you think, and so I can improve for next year. And Nancy just piped in. It says, "Thank you, Tracy and Jami. Great session." Thank you, Nancy.
Thanks for joining, Nancy.
Yeah.
I'm always here. We have a joke in my company that I'm the accessibility ambassador. I should wear a sash. And that's just because, again, 2 years. So Shannon Frank, one of my colleagues in Indianapolis, we came up with that. So if you want to talk to anybody, you need some accessibility accommodations, I'm the accessibility ambassador.
Nice. That's awesome. I like that. Thank you. You're welcome. All right, everybody, until next week, I'll be back. Next week is going to be the last episode of the year, because I'm going to take Christmas off. And maybe I'll do one on New Year's Eve. Who knows? I don't know if anybody will be around. But until next week, stay safe and eat well. And thanks for tuning in.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks for listening to the Eating at a Meeting podcast, where every meal matters. I'm Tracy Stuckrath, your food and beverage inclusion expert. Call me and let's get started right now on creating safe and inclusive food and beverage experiences for your customers, your employees, and your communities. Share the podcast with your friends and colleagues at our Eating at a Meeting Facebook page and on all podcast platforms. To learn more about me and receive valuable information, go to tracystuckrath.com. And if you'd like more information on how to feed engagement, nourish inclusion, and bolster your bottom line, then visit eatingatameeting.com.